my mother's dad, his mother, she practiced voodoo. So that was a weird dynamic because I'm in a cult. I would hear this very weird clicking sound. I would be in this trance-like state. There's no such thing as a good witch. If anyone makes you angry, you will do something to them. Pentagram was in the middle of the floor. Like we had to stand inside the pentagram. The windows were blacked out and it was dark in there. And we did this ritual by candles. Welcome to Deliverance Diaries, from casting spells to casting out demons. My name is Karla Callan. I am your host of Deliverance Diaries, and this is my testimony. I like to say that I was marked twice by the time I was born. I was marked with a calling over my life that God had for me, and I was marked by the devil for sure. And I'll explain why I say that. So I grew up in a middle-class family, and I had a normal childhood, I guess you would say. I am third generation into a religious organization that is basically a cult. And it's hard to call it that because I have a lot of family who is still part of this religion. And growing up, I don't think anyone in my family was like a Christian outside of this organization who claims that they're Christian. But I didn't know any people that just went to the Pentecostal church or the Baptist church or the non-denominational or something like that. My family was either this organization or they were nothing. So it started with my grandmother. She became part of this organization. She brought my mother into it, my mother's brother. I'm not sure about one of her brothers. I don't think he ever was. I know one of them was until he was disfellowshipped. We were born into it. So I was born into the organization. I didn't know any different because once I was born, I was attending the services and everything since I was an infant. And what I found really odd when you think back in my family is that, so I was born into this religious organization. And then on the flip side of that, my grandfather, my mother's dad, his mother was a voodoo witch. She practiced voodoo. And so that was a weird dynamic because I'm in a cult religious organization, but I'm also coming from a background of generational witchcraft. So growing up, for what it was, I had a normal home life, mom and dad. My parents are still married to this day. They're going on 55 years of being married or more. I grew up with a sibling. My mom only had 2 kids. My sister is still in the organization, and now she has passed that on to one of her children is in it too. So that would be like the 4th generation. I got out when I was young, when I was a teenager. But growing up, I wasn't allowed to do a lot of things. You're not allowed to really fraternize with people outside of that organization. It's frowned upon. I was not brought up in an extremist household. There are people who are in this religious organization who are extremists, who literally will disown their own family because they're not one, who are super strict. I wasn't like that, but I was taught you didn't fraternize with the outside world and build lasting relationships. It was like, you have to be in it so you can play with the kids at school, but like, you're never going to their houses or anything like that. And the only way that I would ever be able to go to someone else's house who was not part of the organization was if I had like school projects with like, I got assigned a partner at school and then I had a school project. Then I would be able to go to someone else's house if need be, because usually my mom didn't let them come to my house. So that was the only way really I got to interact with kids outside of this organization, was literally like school. And you're also not allowed to do like sports, but as I got older, I started doing things anyways, but you're not allowed to go to dances. You're not allowed to do a lot of things. You're not allowed to talk to boys when you get older, which I think is very dangerous because when you suppress something like that's part of growing up, like learning, okay, you start liking boys and boys start liking girls. But when you're trying to repress these feelings and hold these back as kids are getting into the young adulthood, it causes a lot of problems and it usually backfires, or they end up, like in this organization, getting married super early just because like they like a boy and that's what's pushed on you is get married. So there was that side of my childhood. And then there was also the side of going to my family who wasn't in the organization. I was very close to them. We didn't shun the people who weren't. Like, we went to all our family reunions. That was considered different. So it was really people outside your family you're not really going to fraternize with, but like family, that was different. And basically, I remember, like, as far as growing up with the witchcraft, it was my great grandmother who I recollect practicing and knew about. I don't know, like, who else in my family was dabbling or practicing, for the simple fact I was very young and I just wasn't around them like that to know. But I did know my great grandmother did, because my mom later on was telling me more stories. But I knew at the time that she did some type of witchcraft. And so basically, what I remember is an incident when I was about probably 7 or 8. And I believe it was like summertime because I was home from school. And my mom got a phone call. And the phone call was from my great aunt, who was my grandfather's sister. And that's where my great grandmother lived. And my mom, I remember her frantically telling me, like, hurry up, we have to get in the car. We got to go over to my aunt's house. And she gets me there, rushes in the house, and they're like, my aunt is just meets us at the door, just frantic. And my mom tells me, like, sit down, don't move, I'll be back. And so her and my aunt leave and they go down the hall and disappear. Of course, telling a kid, like, oh, don't do anything. Of course, I'm like meddling around, touching stuff. And then I hear the door open, and it was probably like maybe an hour later or more. And I run back in the kitchen and sit down, and I can hear my mom and my great aunt like whispering and freaked out. And then I remember my mom just saying, come on, let's go. And we left. It wasn't until later down the line, when I was like a teenager, that my mom explained to me why we had went there and what had happened. So when my mom got a phone call from her aunt, was calling her because she had went to check on her mother, and she was levitating off the bed, and she was sleeping, but levitating, like, we're not talking like a couple inches. We're talking like feet off the bed. And she freaked out. So she calls my mom, and my mom comes over, and they go in there with the Bible. But remember, they're in their religious organization. So they go in with the Bible and they start praying. And I don't know how long she was levitating. Finally, through the praying and reading of the Bible, she finally went back onto the bed. And what was crazy, my mom said, is that when she got back on the bed, she woke up out of the sleep that she was in and was, oh, hi, guys, what are you doing in here? And had no idea what had been going on. My mom told me another story about when my sister, who's older than me, was like 5 months old. My mom was in Texas, where my great grandmother lived at the time. And my mom was staying at her house. And my mom said in the middle of the night, the ceiling opened up. She said it literally split apart. And she said this light came down and was directly on my sister in the bed. And my mom said she became so freaked out that she jumped on top of my sister and started praying until all of a sudden it stopped. And she said as soon as that happened, she grabbed my sister, ran out of my great grandmother's house, and never went back to her house. What was interesting, though, is that even though I heard these stories and stuff, it was not thought of as serious. It was more like a running joke. Great grandmother is a witch. She put hexes on people and things like that. It wasn't looked upon, oh, this is like spiritually wrong. We need to make sure that we shut these doors. It wasn't, that's not how it was. It was just, she's a witch. Yep, she used to put hexes on people and all kinds of stuff. There was more to that. So not only was she putting hexes on people, but my mom used to call her a rolling stone. Basically, my great grandmother had a whole bunch of children, but with different men. And my mom would be like, yeah, great grandma was a rolling stone. And at the time, I didn't really know what that meant, but I didn't know what that meant. But needless to say, what came out later is that she would, if she found, let's say, a married man that she liked, she would use witchcraft in order to draw that man to her. And one thing about witchcraft is that there's something that's going to backfire when you are operating out of God's will. There's always going to be something that backfires. And needless to say, she would get these men through witchcraft and then have kids, and then they would leave. Or whatever. Things would happen. She would never be with them. And so she just kept doing this. And when I was probably about 8 or so, maybe 9 is when she passed away, but she lived well into her late 90s. She finally passed away. One of the things that I do remember that happened with me, I would always go with my mom because I was young. So I'd be with my mom. My mom would always go to my aunt's house. And so I was around my great grandmother quite a bit. And my mom would always have me go in the kitchen because that's where she'd be sitting. And she usually would be eating. And my mom, she would tell me, give your great grandmother a hug. And so I would. And then I would sit down. And I was pretty intrigued by her just because she was like this really old lady, but she also wasn't like mean or something. She was very nice. If you didn't know that she practiced voodoo, you wouldn't know. She was just a nice lady. But I do remember like weird things happening. So there would be times, and she did this almost every time I would come over, this same situation and scenario would happen. So she would be eating, and then all of a sudden I would hear this very weird clicking sound. Till this day, I can't give you like a clear-cut definition or explanation of the exact sound because it was just this odd clicking. But what would happen is I found myself being almost like trance. So I would just like zone out and be in this like trance-like state. And I don't really recall her talking, but I don't know because I would be so like stuck in this trance. And then sometimes would hear her like say something and I'd be like, what? I kept telling my mom this, Mom, why does she make these weird sounds when she's eating? And my mom's, oh, it's because she has gold teeth or something, she said. And it was like, no, this is like not that. And what really stuck out to me and stayed with me is that she was never eating something crunchy, actually be making a sound like that. It wasn't until later when I started looking into the occult after being saved and witchcraft and voodoo and stuff, I found that there in different practices, like in ancient, like African witchcraft practices to voodoo, there's this thing where they make a clicking sound and it's literally to control a person and it trances you. So I'm pretty sure that's what she was doing to me as a child. And I'm pretty sure what she was doing was passing on this demonic gift that she had, imparting it into me. And I also think she did it to my cousin, who was my great aunt's granddaughter. So I'm pretty sure at least us two for sure, she passed it into her. But I know for me, for a fact, yeah, that 100%, I am 100% sure that's what she was doing. So after she passed away, it was done. But what I started to notice as a child is that I had these unexplainable gifts. And the gifts that I would have would be like dreaming, like visions and dreams. And they would come true. And then I remember talking one time, I don't know how I did it, but getting inside the head of my cousin, who was 45 minutes away from me. That's where she lived. And I remember asking her, like, what are you wearing today? And she told me, and I was able to match my clothes. And when I got down to where she was, we were literally matched. And I don't know if she could hear my voice, if she could talk back to me, but I clearly talked to her and got the information out of her mind. So I don't really think she had the same gift. I don't know. I never asked her. I just kept it quiet because it was trippy to me that I was able to do that. And because I was also in this religious organization, I was very careful not to let anyone know the things that I could do. There were some like friends of mine as I got into a teenager that I would warn through vision, through the dreams and stuff that I was having. And I would tell them like, don't go here because this is going to happen. And they would come true. And then they were just, oh, wow. Like, how did you know that? And I'm like, oh, I don't know. So I pretty much kept that type of stuff quiet. And I just grew up in this religious organization trying to be a good little whatever church person or church girl. But really, I always knew that there was just something off about this. But I guess when I finally left, I chalked it up more to rebellion than I did this religion is wrong, because I didn't know any different. I had been born into this. I had no outside source to even compare it to, because the religion that I was in, you're not allowed to go to other churches. You're not allowed to even remotely explore another religion. You're not allowed to listen to like gospel music or anything like that. You're allowed to do secular things. You can listen to secular music, go to secular concerts, watch movies, do whatever, but you're not allowed to do anything that would lead you into finding out the truth and that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. Yeah, no. I was very sheltered in that sense. And I just grew up as a child, like a happy kid. And there were things going on, like my dad, I didn't find out until later that like he had trauma that had happened to him that brought this on. But my dad was like a drinker. And when I was little, I don't really remember very much of it. I don't remember too many like bad episodes or something. But once I was a teenager and getting into my teenage years, I became aware of he drank a lot. But he wasn't like a mean drunk. My dad never beat us or anything like that. He barely even spanked us. He definitely was a drinker. I do remember like being young and the elders from the church came one time to talk to my dad. And because my dad was like an elder in that organization as well, but he was drinking and stuff, just drinking a lot. And I remember them coming and talking to him about it. And my dad would go through like stages where he would stop drinking altogether for like months at a time and then pick it back up, and months at a time go without it. And so it was just like part of my life. So I just grew up in this organization. I was, for the most part, I was going to be part of it because that's all I knew. But then once I got into being like a teenager, then everything started to change. Once I started like becoming a teenager, I just knew I don't want to do this anymore. I didn't want to go to the 1,000 church services you have to attend. At the time, I don't think there is that many anymore, but at the time there was one on Sunday, one on Thursday, and one on Tuesday night. So it was like 2 hours, 2.5 hours on Tuesday, an hour or to an hour and a half on Thursday, and then on Sunday, another 2 hours. And then you had other stuff to do, going out and sharing it's not even the gospel, it's just sharing the brainwashing, I would say, with other people and trying to get them to come. And one thing about this religion is that they love bomb people. So they'll love bomb you and like to get you into their organization. Then if you start asking questions, that's a big no-no. If you start questioning the teachings and whether it's right or wrong, they become completely different and they will become extremely angry and will literally kick you out if need be. They are very big on shunning people when they do things wrong, which I saw plenty of people this happen to, that they would shun them and kick them out. And then basically you could eventually grovel and get your way back in, which I just found that to be crazy. And I think that's one of the reasons, like as a teenager, I was like, heck no. And I remember like my sister getting baptized and people around me and my friends, and I refused to get baptized. And the reason why was because I knew that if I did, then if I chose to walk away, like they would shun me and do this huge announce it and all of that. But if I didn't get baptized, then they could do nothing to me. And really, I think also deep down, I knew that I wasn't getting baptized as a representation of giving my life to Christ. When you get baptized in this organization, you're getting baptized actually into the organization. It is the baptism represents your allegiance to this religion, not I want to serve God and publicly show the people that are there that I'm giving my life to Christ. Not the case. So when I was about probably like 14 is when I really started rebelling. And around the time of 14 is when I was sexually assaulted. And I didn't tell my parents because it happened during an assembly at school at night. So I was in choir. That was one thing my mom did let me do was choir because it was during school. But then we had a choir event where I was this time, I believe it was the time that I was singing the solo. And so my mom allowed me to go and she came with me. And during this time, there was a girl in my choir that I had been friends with. And she was, I would say, fast. She had a boyfriend. They were having sex, all kinds of stuff. I was like a freshman, so she was probably a junior, I think. And during this assembly, she told me that this one kid that I didn't really know at school wanted to talk to me. And so she's, come on. She brings me down into the basement of the school, and it's not like a boiler room or something. This basement has like lockers and classrooms and stuff down there, but it's just a very secluded place. Now, mind you, everybody's in the auditorium during this assembly. And so I go down there and she brings me in between this locker area, and there's the kid. And so he just wants to talk to you, blah, blah, blah. And then they proceed to walk off and leave me down there with this kid that I don't really know. And it ends up that he sexually assaults me. Now, I never told anyone because my mom was there at the assembly, and I felt that she would feel really bad because she couldn't save me or she didn't know what was going on. And so I chose to just suppress the memory and suppress the actual trauma and just pretend it never happened. One of the things that I will say, though, is one thing that the Holy Spirit revealed to me later on my journey after I accepted Christ was that trauma is the number one gateway that Satan gets a hold in your life. And so through that sexual assault, and when I say trauma, it doesn't have to be being sexually attacked in any type of way. It can also be verbal assault, verbal abuse, or even physical. It also can be neglect, rejection, like your parents leaving you, giving you up to someone else because they don't want you. There's multiple forms of trauma. I'm 100% know for a fact that once this happened, it opened the door to lust and promiscuity, a lack of trust for men, and almost like a lack of care. And so basically what started to happen was just like, I just went wild and I kind of turned into my great grandmother. If I saw a boy that I liked, then whatever, I'm going to be with him. And then when I got sick and tired of him, I just dumped him and threw him to the side, threw him to the curb. And I continued this well into my adulthood, like just using people and then dismissing them because it was like I'm going to get what I want from you and then I'm done. And it was a form of control, like a control in order to not be hurt, control to not be used. I'm just going to use you. And so this is what happened with the trauma coming into my life. And this is where Satan really got a foothold in my life. And when I was pretty young, I started running with these girls that went to our church, not to the same actual physical church that I went to, but they were part of the organization. And one of the things that I want to say about being in this organization is there are so many kids that were so completely bad, like doing things that they should not be doing, like having intercourse. You would have churches in different neighborhoods, right? And then that would become like a circuit. So you might have 6 different churches, the same organization, but different churches. They would meet up like once a year for this big, huge, like assembly. And then they did another one once a year where it was like all of these churches from like a huge area would meet. And during these assemblies, conventions, whatever you want to call them, kids were doing all kinds of stuff. Like it was a free for all, and parents just didn't know. I wasn't a part of that. I didn't mess with any of the boys that were in that religion. I was messing with boys from outside that I went to school with and stuff, or like boys that I knew from other schools or I met at the mall, but I never would mess around or date like any of the boys really from the organization, just because I felt like that's an easy way to get caught. Because if your parents are in the organization and their parents are in the organization, I was like, it's too easy to get caught and get caught up in a whole bunch of nonsense. So I chose to stay on the outskirts, messing with people that didn't have anything to do with that organization. But I was running with girls who were doing all kinds of stuff. And so basically I was running with this one girl. She was pretty wild and we were doing all kinds of stuff. I'm not really going to get into those stories, I don't think, because I am going to write an entire book and I will start talking about some of those stories, because there's like crazy stories of how like my friend started stripping at a strip club, and basically how I was, at the time I was underage, so I couldn't do that. But like I got into other stuff. There was, for instance, the story about how I even got to Seattle and met my husband at the time was a whole crazy story in itself. So that I will leave for the book. But throughout my teenage years, like I was just wild and I wasn't into drugs. I wasn't really into drinking. It was more, I had a problem with boys. And for the most part, they were the same age as me. But then there were some people who had no business messing with me when I was like 14, 15, 16, and they were like 19, 20, 22, probably had no business. But at the time, I didn't care. I feel protected by God, because there were so many things that could have happened going down that route with older adults getting a hold of me, because I was very naive. I was broken and hurt, but I had repressed and suppressed everything. But I was very naive and really trusting. So I just thank God that I never got hooked up with a 30-year-old. And I thank God that I never got hooked up with somebody who was trying to be a self-proclaimed pimp or something. One thing about me is I was very strong-willed, and that probably would have never happened, for the simple fact that my mentality of I go out and work my butt off and then you're going to take my money never flew with me. So I probably wouldn't have went down that route anyways, but you never know. While I was a teenager, I wanted to do what I wanted to do, and my parents were trying to protect me, but I would just run away and leave and come home whenever. I would sneak out of the house. I didn't care. And as many times as my parents would threaten me, we're going to kick you out. I'm like, so what? I think that had a lot to do with the trauma that I experienced. So basically, I moved away. I ended up getting married. I had 2 children, and I started going to school in college. And this was going to be the first experience that I had with someone from the occult. I was at the mall one day because I was killing time in between one of my classes. And so I decided to go to the mall, to the courtyard, to get some food. And so I'm sitting there and I was like looking at my planner, making sure I had my work schedule down, and then also what days of classes and when my assignments were due. And this woman walked past me and she put a card on and she kept walking. And by the time I had looked up, like and turned to see where she went, she was like it disappeared. It was like she evaporated or something. And I looked at the card and I stuck it in my day planner, and then I went on to class. Later on, I don't think it was right away, but I found that card and I don't know why, but I just ended up calling her and she told me to come meet her. So I ended up going to her house. And when I walked in her house, like it did not look like she was a witch or anything like that. There was no occult things that I could identify now and say, oh yeah, this was there. It just was a normal house. The only thing that was odd was that she had this whole closet as soon as you walked in, and inside was like almost like a baker's rack type setup, but it was full of white candles and they were burning just at different degrees. Some were like brand new, some were in the middle stages, some were ending. There was probably like 30 to 40 candles burning. And so she has me sit down and she basically is sitting there and she just starts talking to me, and she basically proceeded to tell me there's a hex over your family. And immediately it triggers me thinking back to my great grandmother, who my mom had said that she was putting spells and hexes on people and doing voodoo. If she didn't like you, she would do stuff to people. And so immediately I'm thinking, great. So my great grandmother hexed someone. Now you have pissed them off. Now they decided to hex you back and hex your entire family. So immediately she starts telling me, I can help you break this off of you. And what was crazy is I remember her telling me like, oh, you're destined to do all this great stuff, but it won't happen unless you get the hex off of you. So I agreed. And of course she asked me for money, and it wasn't cheap. If I remember correctly, it was like a couple $100. I paid it because I was so like, oh my gosh, there's a hex on me, and I didn't want it to ruin my life. So I literally paid it. She gave me like this Kleenex, and it was bath salts, and she gave me like instructions, and she was like, go home and do this. So being naive, I'm like, okay. So I had to wait, I think, until a full moon it was. And so I waited until there was a full moon. I had to look it up when there was going to be a full moon. And then I had to draw this bath water, put the salts in, and then sit in the bath water. I don't remember like how long I had to sit there, but there was a set time. And then I had to do this like incantation type thing. And then that was supposed to work. And then I got out of the bath and everything. And then I had to call her and tell her. And so I said, okay, I did it. Of course, she comes back with, later on, that you're going to need to do this now because it broke off some of it, but it's really strong. The magic that this woman used, the spell that she did, it's really strong. So we need to keep using more. And so it got to the point where it was just like, I got tired of forking out money. And I'm just like, you know what? I'm done. Forget it. I'm just going to be hexed. I don't know. I'm done. Or I'm going to, at least you got part of it off. I don't know. So I pretty much stopped. And I think I had went back because I wanted like my money back for the very last time. But when I went back to her house, completely empty. Like literally phone disconnected when I tried to call. And I remembered back then, this is a long time ago, so there was no GPS. And so basically it was just like you had to know how to get somewhere by memory. Sure enough, I pull up, gone. House is completely empty. People are in there, like getting it ready for the next tenant. And I'm like, what the heck? Phone is disconnected, gone. So I was just like, that's weird. But then after that, I pretty much stayed away from witchcraft. I had a friend one time that tried to get me to go to a witchcraft store after the fact that she told me that she went with her friend and how she got like really bad vibes. But then she was like, oh, we should go. And I'm like, nah. And one really weird thing about me was like, I've always been very cautious and scary about certain things. Like I never played with a Ouija board. I never went in the dark and did Bloody Mary or Candyman or any of that nonsense. Like I was deathly scared of doing things like that. And I was not cool if somebody else did it. I never watched horror films. I've never seen a horror film in my whole life. I just was like, nah, I'm good. I just never saw the point of instilling fear into myself for no reason. Like, I didn't feel like being scared out of my wits was fun. That didn't seem like a fun time for me. So I just never watched horror films. Me and my husband at the time end up splitting up. We end up getting divorced, and I end up moving back to Portland, Oregon. And so during this time, we're battling, and it was not a very amicable, nice divorce at first. We're at war with each other. That was going on, and I had to start all over. So I had to find a new place to live and then also a job. And so I did. And basically, one day I had went to Barnes and Nobles because I had ran out of books because I used to read books like nonstop. And I'd ran out of books. So I thought, I'm going to go to Barnes and Noble. So I end up going to Barnes and Noble, and I'm walking up and down the aisles, and basically I get to this aisle and I see these witchcraft books, and I pick them up and I start thumbing through them. And then there's 3 of them that caught my eye. And so I was like, I'm going to just buy these because I was amused by them. I get them home, and one of them was really ridiculous. It was just like a lot of ingredients. I was like, I don't even know what that is, and I don't even know where to get this stuff. So I tossed that one. Then there was another one, and it had a very simple spell. And so immediately I was drawn to that, and I thought, I'm going to do a love spell. And so I ended up doing it, and I really just did it just to see if it would work. After I do the love spell, it definitely works. And I'm just like, whoa, this is crazy. That pretty much opened up the door for me in now doing witchcraft because it worked. And so now it was like, I want to do something else to see if it works and something else. And so I started basically doing spells. I think really what I was drawn to is the sense of power I had, and also the fact that it was real and it worked. I didn't understand like the background of where I was drawing this from, the energy, the power, the strength to cast these spells, and who was behind it. That never occurred to me. And so I just started practicing. Then I started honing in on like different things that I really liked in witchcraft, and one of them was candle magic. And so I started doing that, and that became one of my go-tos. And I just began practicing magic. I didn't practice magic for money. I didn't offer to do spells and stuff for people for money. I practiced magic more for myself and for like my friends around me. But also, one of the things that I have to say is that I hear people say, and I've always heard people say, is that, oh, I'm not a bad witch. I'm a good witch, or I only practice white magic. I don't dabble in black magic, which is like your darker arts of voodoo and Santeria and all of that. You'll have people like, oh, I'm just a Wiccan. I just practice nature magic or whatever. There's no such thing as a good witch. So I'm just going to tell you right now. I'm going to say it again for those in the back. There's no such thing as a good witch. I don't care what you're practicing. When someone, if anyone makes you angry and literally pisses you off enough, you will do something to them. So I am here to be a witness. That is completely what happened. I literally was not a witch that practiced harming Christians or anything like that. I didn't even know that was a thing. When I just practiced to be practicing and realized I had these gifts, I had the gift of being able to make things happen. And the one thing that I did do is if you made me mad, and I don't mean cutting me off in traffic or something like that. If you did something that was devastating to me, that pissed me off enough, I would literally do black magic on you and ruin your life. And I never did anything to the extent of trying to kill someone. Oh, I hope they die. But I would literally do stuff to where their whole entire life would be ruined and it would crumble, and I would watch it fall. Like I would watch them fall, a building toppling over. I would just do the spell and sit back and watch like their whole life and them self-destruct. And so that's how I would get back at people. There was no slashing tires or getting in fist fights or something. I would just cast a spell over you, a dark one, and watch your life fall apart. And then go about my day. And one thing too that they don't tell you when you're dabbling in witchcraft or the occult or anything like that, that this is all operating from Satan. And so for everything Satan gives you, every spell that comes true, every money spell you make and you gain money, or you gain love from a love spell, or anything like that, everything that you do that has to do with the occult is from Satan. And so what happens is that he might give you the money that you did a spell for, but he's also going to give you depression. He might give you that love interest that you so wanted through a love spell, but now you also have addiction to alcohol, drugs, food, gambling, compulsive addiction to sex, whatever. It doesn't matter. He doesn't care. He doesn't care what he gives you as long as he knows that he has you literally bound. It's all he cares about. He just needs you to be bound and have that stronghold to where you feel like you can't get out and break free. And so that's what he does. He's like a genie. For every wish that he grants, you also pick up something that you don't want. He causes chaos in your life, whatever. This happened to me. So I was deep into witchcraft, casting spells, working, doing all this stuff. I was very big into calling on the ancestors and using the elements, earth, wind, water, fire, the sun, the moon, the stars. I was literally writing my spells out using this. I would make sure that I did things on the full moon because that's when the energy is so strong. I was just deep into it and casting spells to benefit me and to benefit my life. There were things that were happening that were amazing. There was things in the back end that were happening as well that were dark, and then also things that were brewing that hadn't even happened yet. I was just knee deep into witchcraft and I was practicing it. I was really weird about it, so I was never open about it. So I didn't walk around telling people like, oh, I'm a witch. People didn't really know unless you were like in my inner circle. Then you knew because you were around me enough to where you would have seen like an altar up when I was in the middle of doing a ritual or in the middle of doing like a spell. So I didn't have altars in my house that people could just see or something like that. And I didn't keep an altar up. I would create one every time I wanted to do a spell. And I did it in a certain place, in a certain area of my house, away from everyone else. And so most people didn't know because you would have had to go into my basement in this one dark area. And so most people coming to my house had no idea that I was practicing witchcraft down there. And basically, I ended up just living my life. The one thing that Fate did with the witchcraft is he started downloading information. So he started giving me the information of how to do other things. Like he gave me the information of how to practice sex magic. And one of the things that I want to say is that recently I was watching a video and there was a girl on there and she was showing videos off of the TikTok platform of girls, young girls, who are teaching other girls how to do spells, love spells, over their boyfriends without them knowing. This is the problem with love spells, is that you are violating someone else's free will. You literally take that from them. Not to mention, this love spell is a binding spell. So what happens, it binds you and that person together. So like when you have intercourse, you soul tie. When you are using sex magic or you're doing love spells, not only are you soul tying through intercourse, but you are binding yourself and that person to you by taking their free will. What happens is that the person that you do the love spell on cannot leave you alone. It takes so much time, effort, and work for them to break away from you because you bound them to you. But what people don't understand is even if you're the one who did the spell, you're bound to them to where when you get tired of them, it's hard for you to leave them as well. People don't understand all of this is spiritual. And so basically, I was doing these things. I was binding people to me, and it was hard to break free of them when I didn't want to deal with them anymore. I look at it back now, and the spells that I was doing would literally make people like do crazy things in order to keep me close and stuff. And basically, it's a violation of free will. And it's also manipulation, because you are manipulating God's will and God's law of law of order and how things are done. You're going in and manipulating and breaking that order and saying, I know better than you and I can do better than you. And so that was basically what was going on. I stayed practicing for over 18 years. And throughout the 18 years of me practicing, there was a lot of chaos, getting in bad relationships, getting in abusive relationships. And for me, the abuse wasn't so much like attacking me. It was more like I was a person who would fight back. So it wasn't like one-sided. It was more like I wasn't scared of you. And so when I talk about like that, it was like fist fighting, throwing down, because it wasn't me like cowering in a corner. It was me picking up a knife and possibly stabbing you back. It was very crazy during this time. And even when I tried to have a normal relationship with someone, because I really liked, it would just end up going just left at some point in time, and something would go wrong, or it just was a lot of chaos. And then on top of that, because of the trauma that I dealt with as a teenager, and then the traumatic experience of having to get a divorce and going through all of that, and the fighting over the kids and just everything, it led me down a dark path. And I started just trying to chase the pain away. And so it started with like me and my like best friend going out all the time. So me and my ex-husband at the time had split who had the kids and during what time. I had a lot of free time when the kids were with him. And so me and my best friend started going out. We would just go out and party. We started going clubbing and drinking. And then it moved from when I didn't have the kids, like having people over and we're partying and drinking. And it just kept going. And then the drinking, you never think about it because you're like, oh, I'm just having fun. But eventually it just got out of hand. And then I just started drinking all the time. And I drank pretty much every day. But I was like, could work and everything else, but I was still drinking. And there was ups and downs. I would say like, for the most part, it was like not super bad. But then what would happen is if I went through something traumatic that affected me in a bad way, then I would go on these like benders where sometimes it would go days and I couldn't even really remember because I'd just been drunk for 3 days because I just didn't want to deal with whatever. It was far and few that happened, but it did happen where I would just use the alcohol to just completely numb me and disappear. But then here's reality. When you come out of that, the issue is still there. And so then but it was like for some reason after that, I would be ready to deal with whatever. And then I would just move on. So this was just off and on for years and years and years. And then like in my early 30s, I had a boss that I worked with that I was super cool with. I found out that he was a Mason. And so I asked him to get me into the Masons, which the female version of the Masons is an Eastern Star. So I joined the Eastern Stars. I was inducted in. Basically, in order to get in, you have to know someone who's already in. And so since I knew him to be a Mason, I was able to get in. And he wasn't like super far up. He was probably like on the 17th level of Masonry or maybe like the 20th level. So he wasn't all the way to the 33rd or 31st or 32nd, but he was on his way. They induct you in. And basically, I just want to say, like, from somebody who actually was in it, I was practicing witchcraft still, obviously, because I was practicing witchcraft for 18 to 20 years. During this time, I was practicing witchcraft. And when I went to the induction or whatever, indoctrination into the Eastern Stars, it is 100% a ritual and they are using witchcraft. one of the requirements was that I had to dress in all white, and all the way down to your undergarments had to be all white. Whatever outfit you're wearing had to be all white. It had to be a dress or a skirt. And then you had to have white shoes. Everything had to be white. You had to bring white gloves. When I got to where they met, the windows were blacked out and it was dark in there. And we did this ritual by candles, like everywhere lit up. And basically they gave us like the Freemason Bible, and there was things that we had to read out of it. And so basically how the women one goes is like, there was a huge symbol for the Eastern Stars, which is a pentagram, was in the middle of the floor, like a huge one. We had to stand inside the pentagram, and they basically have you take on a persona like out of the Bible. But I'm pretty sure what they were doing was in like probably opening us up to a demon that was able to come in and out. So basically they used the names in the Bible. So like the persona that I took on was Ruth. There was like somebody who took on the persona of Deborah, and they just kept going like Miriam, and they had all these names. And there was only like 6 of us women going through this, but it was like, it was a couple hours of this ritual, and we had to do all this stuff and recite these incantations. And basically when I was doing it, I was like, this is 100% a spell. I'm like, this is 100% witchcraft, and this is 100% some type of incantation that we're doing, and we are conjuring something. But I didn't care at the time because I was already a witch. So what did it matter? I'm like, oh, this is just, I guess, like a coven. And I stayed, I got really excited about being an Eastern Star. And I'm just like, this is so cool. And at the time I had a boyfriend that I took with me to one of the Eastern Star and Mason like events, because one of the things that they hide behind is that they're like philanthropists. And so they help out the community and all this stuff. And so that's what we were doing. And my boyfriend at the time got really uncomfortable. I don't know why, but I couldn't find him. And so I went looking for him, and he was back in my car. And I'm like, what are you doing out here? And I want to leave. And I'm like, why? And I don't want to be in there. He's like, I don't want to be around. No, I want to leave now. And so I said, okay. And I decided to leave. We're in the car. I was asking him like, what's going on? What's wrong? And he was just like, I don't want to be there. Then he just turned to me and I don't want you to be an Eastern Star. I don't want you to do that. I ended up eventually just walking away from it. And I never like went and told them or called anyone. I just stopped going, stopped paying the dues, and just left it alone. And no one really bothered me. I think the head person texted me, but I just wouldn't answer back. And so eventually they just stopped talking to me. So I just kept just in and out of craziness. And eventually it got to the point where I had landed this really good job. I was dating this guy, and we had moved in together. And basically his grandmother who raised him, so he called her mom, had been like a medium and a psychic. He was really cool with stuff like that. After we moved in together, we ended up going to this metaphysical fair, because how I got into the New Age. So I was in witchcraft, joined the Masons. Then this is later on, I get into New Age. And so I was probably like in my late 30s going into 40. And how I got into the New Age was under the guise of self-help. So it was completely like, oh, practice gratefulness, mindfulness, be kind to others type thing. And slowly but surely, it was like I was sucked in. And this was a lot different to me from witchcraft. It was more like there was a purpose in this, and it was about giving and helping others. And so I felt where witchcraft for me was just about me and being self-centered and selfish and just casting spells for myself and stuff. Whereas this was like, you help people and it's about nature and all this stuff. I came across like a metaphysical fair flyer, and I had told my boyfriend, hey, I want to go. And he's, oh yeah, we can do that. And so we ended up going. And there I like sat with a shaman, and he was talking about my ancestors and my grandparents and stuff. And then I went to this other lady who could It had to do with something with reading something in your eyes. It was weird. But then there was tarot card readers and mediums and psychics. And so I sat down with a tarot card reader. She was really bad and didn't know what she was doing. And so I got up and I was just like, you know what? I'm out of here. Like, I'm about to leave. Then Satan is so crafty. He thought, we're about to lose her. So right next to him is this dude who is like a psychic. And I was like, okay, I'm going to try this one last time. And as soon as I sat down, the dude started telling me all different kinds of stuff about me. That why would a stranger know? And at the very end of our conversation, he said, you're an open channel, and so is one of your kids. And I'm like, what does that mean? And he's basically, it means that you have multiple gifts and the abilities to hone these gifts and to really become super powerful and to be able to use these gifts for good and blah, blah, blah. And hook, line, and sinker, I fell for it. And I'm like, ooh, that's so cool. And he was so excited about it. He was so excited. You have the gift of clairaudience, clairvoyance. And then he just started rattling off all these gifts. And so I started diving in head first and getting like metaphysical books and learning about clairvoyancy and clairaudiency and all these different things, and starting to try to train my mind to be able to like move things. And I was like really just went down rabbit holes of tons of different things that I was just opening doors to. I was saging. I discovered chakras, and then I got really into chakra balancing. And then I was really into the crystals and still doing like candle magic, and then still doing sex magic. And then from there, it was just, I got into Reiki. I came across Reiki healing, so that I added that under my belt. And when I started doing Reiki, that is super demonic as well. So I want to break this down because people think, oh, it's just like a healing type thing. It's not. So in order for somebody to become a Reiki master, first of all, you have to go through a training. I trained with this lady who had trained with some of the founder of Reiki or whatever, and went to a special Reiki school in like Hawaii, where the person, because Reiki started in Japan, the person moved to Hawaii. And so this lady was trained to become a master with the person, like it was either the person who invented it or the person that was after them that they trained up, but it was somebody like up there in the Reiki world. And so basically I met with her, and it was like a group thing. So there was a couple of us that we came to her house, and she was like, okay, we're going to go through the training. So the first day we learned all about Reiki, like what it is. We learn the history of it. And then she shows us the sigil, and these sigils have different meanings and they do different things as far as healing. Then she has us, for the rest of the time we're there that day, practice drawing out these sigils, drawing them in our hand, drawing them in the air. And she proceeds to tell us like these sigils are how you're going to activate the healing power. So we come back the next day, and that's when it starts the indoctrination of this. It's like these meditational things that we had to listen to, and they were guided. But as you were emptying yourself in these guided meditations, it's calling on these specific entities and powers to come into your body. So basically, we opened ourselves up to demons during this process. And then the Reiki was imbuing these demons into us in order to give the power. So we did that. And then eventually, like day 3, we were actually practicing on each other. So we were actually using the sigils to ignite the healing force within us and then healing each other. And I'm going to tell you, it's definitely not fake. The one thing that people don't realize is all of this, the witchcraft, the magic, the spell casting, the Reiki healing, the clairaudient, clairvoyant, all of this is real. The problem is that it's real. It is Satan's counterfeit of God's gift, but also you're operating between demons. So you don't have any power, but the demons that you're conjuring and calling upon do. And so you're basically, for instance, a person who's a medium or a psychic, they don't really have the gifts. What that is that we all have what's called a familiar spirit that's attached to our bloodline, our family. So that familiar spirit knows everything. And you have to remember, these are spirits. They have been around for hundreds of years, thousands of years. So this ain't no joke to them. So they know way back your family bloodline. And then you have the person who's the medium or the psychic. They also have a familiar spirit that goes back on their bloodline. What it is, their familiar spirit and your familiar spirit is talking to each other, and their familiar spirit is relaying it to the medium or psychic. And that's how they get the information. There's no other way. Basically, I was headfirst into the new age. I dove all the way in. I went down every rabbit hole you can think of. And I just was really living my best life, I thought, in the new age. So I finished with Reiki. I was getting ready to become a Reiki master right before I got saved. But I had jumped into other things. So I was really good at channeling. And channeling is basically what you do is you empty your entire mind. So with the new age, I had really stopped like drinking, because you can't really be drunk in the new age. It doesn't really work well. So I've done that, but then I took up smoking weed, marijuana, whatever you want to call it, because it would help to chill me out and relax me and open my mind up. And so I took up that instead. And basically I would smoke, and then I would relax. I would go into a meditative state, and then I would channel. And channeling is basically allowing a demon, but they do not come across necessarily as demons. So Satan was very crafty with me. He never presented himself in his true form. Neither did the demons. And that I know why now, because if they would have, I would have been like, oh, I'm out. So they always appeared to me under the guise of your higher self, which FYI, there is no higher self. You're just operating with demonic entities. There is no higher self, okay, at all whatsoever. Or they would come to me as like different names of entities, and they would channel messages through me. Then I also took up automatic writing, which is the same thing as channeling, except for now they are using your body to write. And so that's what was happening. And then I got to the point where I started like dabbling in runes, which are these little tiny like tablet things that have these symbols on them. And basically each symbol represents something. And so you cast them out, and then basically you can foretell the future or whatever with these runes. And then I got introduced to the pendulum, and I would literally practice every day with the pendulum, and I would keep it perfectly still. And then with my mind, I would control it, and I would tell it to start moving, and then I would tell it to start circling. And then in my mind, I would say stop, and this thing would stop on the drop of a dime. And once I had that kind of control, so I thought, because that was a demon 100%. But once I had that kind of control, then I started using the pendulum to predict things or asking it questions, and it would answer. You basically can do like swing this way for yes, swing this way for no. And I wasn't using like back and forth. I would be like swing clockwise. And then, so this thing would be spinning. And then if I asked another question, it was a different thing. I would be like, now stop and go side to side. And then, so for it to go spinning and then go like this and then side to side, it's crazy. It's not like something that can just happen by fluke. And so I got really good with that. And the pendulum, I had quite a few of those, and I would do pendulum reading, and I started doing Facebook Lives and doing chakra balancing for people. I started teaching people like how to eat for their chakra and all of that stuff. And I've stayed in doing that for years. And so I was just in the new age for years, and I just was like really deep into it. And it was funny because this whole time I had always been practicing witchcraft. Nobody knew, not my family, nothing. As soon as I got into the new age, one day my mom was like, "Are you into that nonsense?" I just kind of laughed it off and was like, "Oh no." But 100% I was. And yes, it was nonsense. There's so many different parts and facets of the new age. And so one thing that really sucks people in is that you can take bits and pieces of what you like about the New Age and completely make it into your own. And you're still accepted by the whole New Age community because there's so many different ways that you can go and so many rabbit holes you can go down. And so that's basically what happened, was that I was just picking and choosing parts of this. But one of the things that I remember that really stuck out to me even back then was that I still believed in God. Like, I believed that God was real. You could not convince me ever that, like, we came from dirt or an amoeba or something like that. Like, I knew that we had to have been created. There was just no way that we just accidentally got here or it was a fluke. And so that stayed with me. And like, I had gotten into the aliens and going down that route. And I would hear people say, oh, Mother Earth and Mother Gaia and things like that. And I just would push that off. Oh, okay, whatever. But I didn't really fully accept that. I didn't fully accept, oh, Mother Gaia and all of this. I did not do that kind of stuff. But I did get into, even through witchcraft, I was into like praying to the gods and goddesses, but somehow I still knew that there was like one main God who created everything, if that makes sense. And so during this time, I had broke up with my boyfriend while I was in the New Age, and I had done stuff to him. I didn't do like a love spell, but I practiced sex magic on him. So he was definitely bound to me. It was very hard for him to leave, and he pretty much was acting like irrational and kooky. But he finally ended up leaving and stuff. And so I just really focused on my New Age beliefs and practices and really was just diving into honing my skills and going to these little metaphysical fairs because that's what I would do. There was a lady who was a medium / psychic, and she would host these seminars on a pretty regular basis. And so I remember going to one, and before we broke up, my boyfriend would go with me. I had brought my youngest son to a couple of these. One January, we did like a burning bowl session. I remember bringing my son. He was probably like 11 or 12, and he really liked it. And this was the one that the psychic had said had the same gifts and was an open channel. And so I started teaching my son, like literally like about crystals and how to like meditate and align the same color crystals as your chakras, like on your body as you're meditating, and all of this stuff I had started to teach him. And at the time I'm thinking it's harmless. This is just going to be cool for him. He's going to have gifts like I do. There was one specific time that I had went to this seminar that she was doing, and I got introduced into like the angel numbers and angel cards. And so on this table, she had these cards with animals and then cards with angels, and she had told us to pick one of each. And then we sat down and I read a card, and then she passed around the book, and the book had the meanings. I remember posting this on my Instagram, like the book. I took a picture of the book, picture of the card, and I had posted it on my Instagram. So the cards with the animals were basically spirit animal cards, and then the card with the angels on them are basically angel cards. I want people to understand these are 100% demonic, and they are just the same as tarot cards, only they call them angel cards so that unsuspecting people will think, oh, that's okay. It's not tarot. It's not part of the occult or witchcraft. This is about angels. Just not to mention, a while ago, I came across a picture. They had redone the Ouija board, turned it pink, put a picture of some crazy looking fake Jesus, and then called it a angel board. But it still had that same little triangle, the same setup as a Ouija board, but now it's an angel board so you can contact angels. Let me be very clear, 100%, you do not contact angels. Angels only answer to God. Now, you can pray to God and tell God, please send your warring angels to protect me or something like that, but you don't have direct line communication. The only time you would have communication with an angel is if the angel presented themselves to you for a reason that God instructed, like a test. Maybe you meet a stranger and they're asking you for food and take them to get food or something, and then all of a sudden they're gone and you never see them again. It tells us in the Bible that we can be actually entertaining angels and not know. So that's totally different. But this is like working with them. You don't work with the angel. It was like conjuring them. You don't get to conjure or call angels. That's not how it works. And from there, I got into like angel numbers online, because and angel numbers also are the synchronicity numbers. So in New Age, there's this thing called synchronicity numbers, and it's 1111, 2222, 3333, 4444, 555, and it keeps going. Or like 111, 333. And the moment that I read about synchronicity numbers and angel numbers, like Satan made a point that I would look at the clock and it was always on a synchronicity number. Like I swear I never looked at the clock, but as soon as I did, synchronicity. I started seeing it in license plates and home addresses and on TV, just everything. It was everywhere. And I got really big into that. And then I also was really big into frequencies. So I would listen to these frequencies, sound frequencies, all day and all night. I would sit at work because I didn't work with the general public. I would sit at work and on YouTube, and I would be listening to frequencies nonstop. And the frequencies that I was listening to was like body healing ones, to astral projection, to balancing your chakras, meditational ones. And basically, before I broke up with my boyfriend, one night we were sleeping and I ended up like waking up, or so I thought. And I was like, who in the heck is like this woman in my bed? And I'm looking down at this sleeping woman and I'm hot about it. And I'm just like, who is this in my bed? And then I remember this. I really looked down over this woman and realized that it was me. And the moment that I realized that I was the one in the bed, I slammed so hard back into my body that I shot up off the bed and sucked in air as if like I had been dead. And then I was like sitting upright, freaking out. And I'm just like, oh my goodness. And I'm hitting my boyfriend at the time and waking him up. And I'm like, dude, I just astral projected out of my body. I just literally saw myself. And he's, oh, okay, great. And goes back to sleep. And I'm just like tripping. And I had tons of experiences when you're dabbling in this realm and going into the spirit world. I had channeled a spirit who told me that I was Isis, the Egyptian queen reincarnated. And one night I was sleeping. It was either Ra or Horus. One of them appeared at the foot of my bed and was in full like Egyptian gear, like with the animal head and like a spear and skirt type thing, with bare chested, and it was watching me and it was just standing there. And I literally woke up and I blinked and I was like, am I seeing this for real? And I didn't know what to do. So I just sat there, laid perfectly still, just staring at it. And then it finally went away. Another time I was cleaning my house and decided I was going to smoke. So I started smoking, and all of a sudden I blacked out into this dark void. And my grandmother, who had died when I was 27, and now this is around when I'm like 40, 39, 40. Basically, my grandma appears to me. So she had been long dead, and she starts talking to me and telling me all these messages and stuff. And I kid you not, I could feel my grandmother. Like I could feel her, touch her, sense her, but yet I was not physically there. But in this, wherever I went, it felt like I was there. And so when I came to, I had no recollection of how long I had been in this dark void talking to her or anything. But then there was like a time when I decided to take this mind altering drug. What's really scary is you can get it in smoke shop. But I took it, and at the same time, when I took it, I had earphones in my ear and I was listening to frequencies, and I went somewhere and I could see these mandalas, and they were all these vivid colors, and they were moving like everything was alive. And I was like traveling, and it was pretty cool. But then when I wanted to come back, these entities started trying to keep me there, and I had to fight my way back from these entities. And when I snapped out of it, at the time, I had my boyfriend sit on the couch next to me, like we had two couches, like a love seat and a full length couch. And he was sitting on the full length when I was laying on the love seat. And I told him, like, don't leave, monitor what happens. And he said that, like, when I came out of it for 5 minutes, I wasn't actually really there. I thought I was back, but he said I wasn't. He said, like, it took 5 minutes for me to snap out of it. And then once I'm back, I'm like journaling, oh, this happened. But needless to say, like, that experience with using the mind altering drug that I took, and like, this drug is available in a smoke shop. So it's not heroin or something like that, and it wasn't like DMT or something. Like, literally, I just don't want to say the name because, like, you can literally go buy it. But I basically, from that, and then dealing with my grandmother, I was having all these supernatural experiences. And what really got bad was, like, when I would try to go to sleep, instead of sleeping, I would go into the spirit realm and be just traveling all around. And only on a couple occasions, things tried to attack me in there. And so that was freaked me out. But it got so annoying that I would try to either smoke or drink before I went to bed, just so I would fall asleep without jumping into the spirit realm. And at this time, like, I opened my third eye. I was just doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And I was like the type where, oh, I'll try it once. If I don't like it, I just won't do it again. And so I just continued on this journey of dabbling in the new age and just getting deeper and deeper and deeper in. And I was sucking those around me into it as well. But in the back of my mind, I was always pondering, is God real? Is religion real? I don't know. And because in the new age, you hear the term Christ consciousness and all of this. And so I'm like, maybe it's true. Like, maybe it's just Christ consciousness. Maybe we are, like, supposed to be, we have a part of God in us. And so therefore we are God because he's part of us. And just, there was so much nonsense that you're fed. And so eventually what led me to God was God used YouTube. And so one of the things too that I want to talk about that annoys me all the time is when I hear people say, God wouldn't use this, God wouldn't do that, God wouldn't do this. You have no idea what God will use and do in order to leave the 99 to get that one. You have no idea. And for you to try to say that you do know is sheer ignorance and arrogance, because you have no idea the scope of what God sees. He sees everything from past, present, and future. You have no idea. And for someone to speak, oh, I have this inside link to God and he wouldn't do that. It's like, God doesn't need a deputy. He doesn't need a security to monitor what he would and wouldn't do and just tell the people he wouldn't do that. He doesn't need that. He doesn't need Robin, his sidekick. Like, he's fully God and fully everything. And so for people to say, oh, God wouldn't do that, you have no idea what he would do. And you're showing straight ignorance and arrogance, 100%, and thinking that you know what God would do. God literally used YouTube, and how he did it was, at first, he had to break me of my belief system that had been brainwashed into me since I was a child. And so what he did was he used a video that I came across, and it was a woman, and she had all of these degrees, and she was a doctor as well. And basically she studied occult, and she did this discussion on the 5 biggest cults. And so she's in there breaking down, like, why it's a cult, what makes it a cult, and everything else. And as she's doing this, on the list of 5, she goes through like Jonestown and stuff like that. And then she gets to the religion that my family is. And I immediately stood up. And she breaks down why. And she's like, all cults have a doomsday time frame, like Armageddon or the end of the world is going to happen on this day and this time. And then when it doesn't happen, they come up with a new excuse like, oh, what happened was is whatever. And so she broke it down, and it gave me flashbacks to when I was a child. My mom used to have a drawer, and it had all of the paraphernalia from that religion, I'll call it, in this drawer. And there were things that I remember seeing that said it's coming in. I think it was like 1914 or something like that. And then they did it again in 1925 or something. And then again in like 1975, or maybe it was 1924 or 25 or something. And then like 1975, and then again like in the 80s, I think. And so I had an instant flashback to those magazines, and I was like, oh, snap, I remember that. So I was very shocked, and I remember yelling out in the office. Luckily, everybody used to listen to stuff, so nobody really heard me, but I was like, oh my gosh, my mom is in a cult. And I was just like, what do I do? Do I tell her? And then basically, once I finished that video, I just was devastated, because I was like, my whole life I've been told that this religion is the one true religion and everything else is fake. And now I'm being shown that this religion is a cult. And I'm like, so now what's real? And so I was just like very confused, because I was like, what's real and what's not? And then I was like, maybe all religion's fake. Maybe this whole thing, people talking about, oh, Jesus or this God or that God. I'm like, maybe all of this is just made up. And next thing I know, on my YouTube pops up, I want to say it might have been like Russ Dizdar, or maybe the guy Mazzuli or whatever. I can't remember who it was, but they did this like conference thing, and it was recorded, and I was watching it on YouTube, and they were talking about aliens, and they were breaking down like aliens, the encounters, the proof, and all of that. And that was something that I had gotten into in the New Age, was like aliens. In the New Age, there's like a whole galactic federation. And it's all under the guise like these aliens are here to help us. They're here to help humanity level up into ascension and ascend to the last level where you are like a god, basically. And they don't put it necessarily in those terms, oh, you're going to be a god. They put it more, oh, you gain more knowledge. So how Satan fed the lie to Eve, oh, if you eat this fruit, you're going to have knowledge. God's withholding from you. This is really what you need to do. And he showed me that video, and through that video, he made a statement, and he just started talking. And he said, we interviewed 200 or 300 people who had encountered alien abductions. And every single one of them said that how they got it to stop was that they called on the name of Jesus. And I was like, what? And then I was tripped out. Like, they said the name Jesus and it stopped. And I was like, that's crazy. And so I kept listening, and I just was like pondering this. And I'm just like, they said the name of Jesus and it took it all away. And so then at the end of that, he makes a statement, and he says, Satan hates you so much. He doesn't care how you die or anything like that. He just cares that you die not knowing the truth and you die not knowing Jesus. The fact that he said that he hated me really bothered me, and I became very angry, because I was like, why do you hate me so much? What have I ever done to you? I don't even know you. And so through that anger is really how I went down this rabbit hole of studying like the demons, principality, demonology, how the demons came for us, the things that they did, why did they hate us, who did they work for, what was the hierarchy. And it was probably like a year that I spent doing this. And also I had to study and really draw the conclusion that hell was real, because in the religion that I grew up in, there's no such thing as hell. People don't go to hell. Like, they believe in like a purgatory, but it's not for you. It has nothing to do with you, and you're not going to hell. And so growing up like with that, I'm not going to hell. There was no repercussions for my actions. Okay, so I'm not part of this religion and I can do whatever I want. I'm not going to hell, so what does it matter? Once I realized it hated me. And then I realized hell is real. Satan's real. And then came I just remember saying it in my head at work. I want out. And I remember I went home from work and I just remember saying out loud because it was bothering me so bad. And I just said, I will not openly walk into hell. I just won't do it. And I said, I don't know what to do, God, but I know one thing. I'm going to die trying to get into heaven. Whether I get there or not, I don't want to stand before you and say I didn't do anything. So if that means I don't, but I tried my best, then that's what I'm going to do. And so I was like, I'm going to either get to heaven or die trying. And once I had made up my mind, that's really when God started using this one preacher and started putting his sermons on my YouTube. I had never, ever listened to anything that had to do with Christian anything. So there was no way that this would just pop up on my For You part of my YouTube. There was just no way. There was nothing that I ever did frequencies and secular music. So like most of my other For You page all had, and I would look up stuff that had to do with the New Age and witchcraft. So that's what it was filled with. So there was no room for sermon. But yet here was the sermon and I started listening to it. And it really just hit home and I kept listening. And I just knew that there was something about it. And so I just kept listening to multiple sermon after sermon. And this preacher, when I found him, had already been preaching on witchcraft and strongholds and generational curses and all this different stuff and the music industry being demonic and just so many different things. And I was just like soaking it in like a sponge. And that's when I realized I was like, this is the way out. I'm like, this is the end game. It's Jesus. That's pretty much like when I made the decision that I was going to figure this out. So one of the sermons that I watched, that the preacher basically shared his testimony and his story. And he talked about how he was like one of the biggest drug dealers in Kentucky. He was in his 20s when God was calling him to become a preacher. He was in the bar, drunk as a skunk, when the Holy Spirit told him to leave, and he did. He listened to the Holy Spirit, he left, and he said that the minute that he walked out, he was free. And the Holy Spirit sobered him, like instantly. Listening to that is when I got the idea, like, I'm going to go to God and just have God heal me. And so this one night, I came home from work, it was a Friday night, I'd been drinking a little bit, I'd been smoking, but around midnight, something came over me and I just was like, I'm going to go, like, I just knew to get on my knees and I just cried out to God and I just told God, if you heal me from the trauma and from the pain and unforgiveness and all of these different things. And I was just like, if you heal me from this, the addiction, everything, you take it from me, I will never walk away from you. I will never turn my back on you. And soon as I said that, like I sat there and I was, oh, is there going to be a white dove appear or something? But nothing. It was very still and very quiet. And then I began to cry. And all of a sudden, this guttural sob came out, like just, I could feel it like coming out. And I continued to cry. And then finally I got up and I just was like, fine. One thing, that I want to say is it's not up to you to change. It's up to God to change you. Don't ever feel like you have to do something. By surrendering your free will and saying, God, I want you to be a part of my life. I want you to come into my life. That's all it takes. He just needs an invite and he does the rest. And so that's basically what happened was immediately all that trauma, pain, and all of that was gone. I just kept listening to the sermons, and that's when I came across I needed to do a deliverance. And so I had set my heart on I needed to do a deliverance. I've been an Eastern Star. I had addiction. I came out of organized religion, which is occult. I was practicing witchcraft, New Age. There was so many different things that I had opened the doors to. And so I really felt like I need to close these doors. And the only way that I can really break free is to make sure that I'm completely free by doing a deliverance. So initially I found someone, like I Googled them because in my area, there's no deliverance ministry. So I Googled and I found this person in Florida and I called them and I asked, do I have to come there? Do I have to fly there? And they're like, oh no, we can do it over Zoom. So I'm like, okay. And at the end of our conversation, it's feeling so promising. And I'm feeling like, okay, I'm on this path to like figuring everything out and getting healed and everything. And then he like blindsided me with, oh, and we asked for a donation of $467. Yes, it was that specific that I never forgot it. And I was just like, I politely was like, oh, okay, and got off the phone. And the minute that I got off the phone, I screamed in my house, I will not pay for Jesus. And then it clicked in my head, like, I'm going to do the deliverance myself. So I grabbed my laptop, and as soon as I Googled it, up pops this 30-page at least, maybe even more deliverance. And it's walking you through like from every little step. And so I'd gotten it in my head that I was going to pick this day. I'd pick like a Saturday, and I was like, I'm going to do this deliverance. And so Saturday came and I sat down and did it. And I went through like writing on a tablet everybody that I forgave, no matter how young I was or when it happened. I was just writing people that I forgave, and I would then say it out loud, Jesus, I forgive so-and-so for this. And I went down this huge list, and then I went into reading scripture and putting on the armor of God and doing all these different steps. And then I went through the deliverance of renouncing. So renouncing, repenting, and I just kept at it until hours later I had finished the complete deliverance. One thing I didn't realize is that it tells us in the Bible when we clean and sweep our house out that we have to replace it with something. And that is the word of God, which I didn't. So I did this deliverance, cleaned out all the demonic, shut the doors, but then I didn't do anything about it. And it is no lie when the scripture says they come back 7 times more worse. And I felt like they brought like their whole family and friends plan. Hey, let's go inhabit her. Let's go press her. It just like literally chaos started happening, and it just became crazy. And mind you, during this time, I'm still smoking and still drinking. Like that hadn't been broke off of me. And so I'm just like, but I do want to make it clear, like I knew that God had already delivered me. It was just a matter of time before it manifested in the physical. And so basically it ends up a situation with my youngest son. His dad had shown up to bring him home. They had been in like Atlanta or somewhere. When he does that, what he really did was show up at my house and, oh, I don't have anywhere to go, yada. And I was like, all right, you can stay here until you get a place or whatever. And I think he also thought like we were going to get back together. I didn't know how damaged and psychotic that they had became until they were in my house. And then I realized they were hearing things, seeing things, like things that weren't real. I'm like, that's not true. They were thinking like everyone is after them and watching them. And it just got really crazy. And then I had went out of town to visit my daughter, who at the time lived in Hawaii, but she had flown into Seattle to see her dad and family up there. And so I and my youngest son went to meet her. And I used to have cameras in my house, some pointed in my house and outside of my house. My son's dad decided to let his friend over who I did not care for, and they decided to do cocaine in my house. So I was livid, very upset. But one thing about cocaine is, at least for some people, is when they are coming down off of it or on it, they become demonic. And that's what would happen. And so he had attacked me. I'd called the police on him. And then he showed up back at my house because I didn't have the time to get down to get the restraining order in time. And they let him out. He showed back up at my house and he's, you can't make me leave. And it just became crazy. And then what broke the last straw for me was like him talking to females on the phone, trying to get them to come over and fight me. And I was like, I'm done. I'm an adult. I'm too old for this. I'm not fighting somebody because of you. That's hecka childish. And I just was over it. And I was to the point where I was like, okay, if you're not going to leave, then I'll leave. I'll pack my whole house up and leave you in this empty house. I don't care anymore. And so this one day he was just really horrible. And I remember being so stressed out that I had walked down to the liquor store because it was like a block away from my house. And so I walked to the liquor store and I got this small little bottle of liquor. And I didn't drink it because I was like, I felt unsafe around him. So I was like, I don't want to be intoxicated and then him like attack me or set me up or something. So I just was like, put it in this drawer. As the day got into like early evening, it got worse. He was drunk. I don't know where he was getting the alcohol, but he was belligerent, evil, just horrible. And so I remember calling my mom and saying, can you come over here so I can have a witness because I'm going to try to leave. I don't want him doing anything. And my mom ended up, her and my dad came over. And my mom, instead of coming in the house, she said, forget this, and calls the police. And she just says, you need to remove this person. They're violent. So the police show up. He's drunk as a skunk. They kick him out because they're like, he didn't have any mail at my house or anything like that. So technically he didn't really live there. And so they kicked him out. And then the cop who was there was the same cop who arrested him for attacking me and punching me in the face. And so that cop says to me, I don't think you should stay here. You should probably go to your parents for a couple days just because. And I was like, all right. So I pack a bag for me and my son and I leave with my parents. And this is when I grab the bottle and one of my weed pens. And I'm just like, I'm so frazzled and so stressed and just, oh my goodness. And so I get to my mom's house and I'm downstairs and I just remember I'm like, okay, I'm going to drink this. I need to calm down. I need to relax. And so I crack open the bottle. And soon as I tip the bottle to my mouth, I hear as clear as day, this will be the last drink you ever drink. And I came into agreement with it. I said, okay. And then I downed that bottle. The next morning I wake up and I never drink again. Still don't. It was gone. That whole urge, that want, that desire, all of it gone. And so next I just started really pouring myself into God. And I've heard God tell me, like, for the longest, you're not going to go to church. You're not going to do anything but sit with me. And so I spent a year to a year and a half just sitting with God. And it was in this time, mind you, I'm sitting with God, but I'm still smoking. Now I'm not drinking at all. No, not even a drop of alcohol, but I'm still smoking as I'm learning about God. And it gets to the point finally where God is, you know what? It's time for you to go to church so you can be around other people. And so I'm like, okay. So I prayed to God and I asked him to direct me to the correct church. And so he finds a church for me and I start going. And as soon as I walk into this church within a week or two, they're like, we're going to have the baptismal sign up sheet. If you need to get baptized, sign up after church at the back. And so I go and put my name on there. And that was when I really first started battling spiritual warfare all the way. Was like literally when I put my name on the list to get baptized, like I was hearing like, no, you're not ready yet. Try it next time. They do it every month. You can just do it another month. Don't do that. Then people that I haven't talked to in years, ex-boyfriends, all of a sudden showing up, calling me, appearing out of nowhere. I haven't talked to you in 5 years. And all of a sudden you're just here. And I just knew, I was like, something is just up. I wouldn't let it faze me. I wouldn't let it bother me. I was like, delete, mute, don't talk to me. And the day came that I got baptized. And now, mind you, I told you I was still smoking. And so basically I had it in my head. I was like, you know what? When I get baptized and I come out of that water, I knew what it represented, dying to my old self. And so I had got it in my head. I do not want to come out and still be smoking. I don't want to come out and be that person that I was. And I don't want to come out with any of my old habits. And so I literally had made a covenant with God. And I said, if you allow me to get rid of this weed, because I had just went and got a whole bunch of weed. I was like, I'm going to smoke it all. I was like, it was expensive, like $400, $400. I'm like, I'm just going to smoke it all. And then I'm never going to do it again. And basically that's what happened. Like I ended up doing it long before I got baptized. And then my baptismal day, I got baptized and that was that. And that broke that off. And basically I just kept at it. I got into church and I started serving in the church. I was going to Bible studies. taking the classes or stuff. And that's just what I started doing, was pouring myself into God. And that's how I got out of the New Age, and how I was delivered from witchcraft, and how I was healed from addiction, and how I started my new path, and how I got to where I am today. And basically, there is a part 2 to this. I'm not going to sit here and do it now, because that would be who knows how long. But there's a part 2, because one thing that I want people to know is that just because you get saved and you accept Jesus in your life, it's not smooth sailing. You're going to face a lot of spiritual warfare once you accept God. And I like to tell women that I mentor all the time, like, your first year of accepting Jesus is going to be the worst year of your life. You are going to have to fight for your life. But after that, it gets easier and you get stronger. The women that I mentor, I train them to get out of the mentality of taking a defense and waiting for something to happen in their lives, to taking an offense and expecting it, meeting it head on, and putting on the armor and fighting this war that we're in, where we're a pawn between Satan trying to kill us and God, who made us, wanting us to come back to him. And so I always tell them, don't give up. It gets easier, but you have to get through that first year. Basically, I pulled through, and I just really immersed myself in God and Jesus and everything else. And that brought me to where I am today, and, what I do today. One of the things that I thought was really cool is that the gifts that I had when I was practicing New Age are still here, but they're just different. They're used by God in a different way. So nothing is of my own. I don't control it, but God has given me amazing dreams that have actually been words and prophetic for me in my life, showing me my purpose and what he wants me to do and how he wants me to serve his kingdom. I've had like visions while I'm wide awake happen multiple times now, and that was to let me know what I was about to step into as far as who I was and what I would be doing for him. He gives me what I call downloads, the Holy Spirit, on a regular basis. So instead of channeling and I have to do meditation and smoke and all of this, instead, it's not controlled by me. So I can be talking to someone and all of a sudden I get a download of information that he wants me to tell to this person. And then I tell them and it's spot on. It's clearly not from me. It's from the Holy Spirit. But I think that being in the New Age, being in witchcraft, number one, it gave me the ability to believe that this stuff is real. 100%, that Satan was real, that the spiritual realm is more real than this physical, and everything starts in the spiritual and manifests into the physical. It gave me the ability to help other people by going through this, knowing what witchcraft is, knowing what it does, knowing how it destroys you. It helps me to be able to speak my testimony and speak to other people who are battling through New Age witchcraft or having it done to them and don't even know who to talk to, because you sound crazy when you're like, no, people are astral projecting into my house, or I'm being attacked. They're getting into my head. People think you're nuts, and you're not nuts. It's 100% true and doable. I literally was able to get into people's heads and change their thoughts. I did it to my ex-boyfriend all the time. I would just, even to play around, I would like tell him like a sequence of things to do, and then he would do it. And eventually he caught on one time and he said to me, he said, oh my gosh, you were just in my head. I just heard you implanting thoughts. And I was like, what? And I just played it off. But yeah, it's a thing. And this whole process, all my life experiences have brought me to a place that I can help others. And I have experienced a lot of crazy things that I didn't even talk about in this testimony. But like each and everything has made me a stronger person, but also it has given me an ability to reach multiple different people coming from multiple different backgrounds, because I have been through a lot that everyone can relate to something. And so I'm thankful for that. I don't look at my testimony as I'm embarrassed by it. I wear it proudly. I'm super thankful for what God has done. And it's like, why wouldn't I stand up and tell the world? There are so many people out here who are hurting that just by hearing my testimony and the things that I went through, just by hearing that alone can give them the courage to do what I did, and that's to accept Jesus into your life. And yeah, this testimony is the beginning. This testimony was the beginning of my journey with Jesus, but I have a second part to my testimony because spiritual warfare didn't stop. And just because I had Jesus, things didn't go as planned. And so my next part of my testimony will go from once I was in the church and saved and living the Christian life, the things that happened to me afterwards, and the things that God did, the things that God showed me, and how he just basically showed me that I was called with a purpose, and that now where I am today, it's time for me to actually start walking in my purpose. So thank you so much for listening. I hope this touches at least one heart. If it doesn't really matter that it reaches thousands, it's that one person that's pondering Jesus, that's wondering about Jesus. If I could even reach that person, it's worth it. To anyone out there who is coming out of witchcraft, the new age, is having it done to you, has been through trauma, unforgiveness, dealt with loss, whether it's family members to loss of getting a divorce. If there was one piece of advice I would give to you, you're not going to be able to fix you yourself. I had to get to the realization that I could not heal myself. I could not fix myself. No matter that I went down the self-help side of New Age and then got into New Age, I still never fixed myself. When I realized that I couldn't do that and that I needed Jesus to come in and do it, that's when my whole life changed. So my piece of advice is stop trying to fix yourself. Stop trying to think in your head, I'm going to get right, then I'm going to give my life to God, and go to him now at this very moment while you are broke down, tore up, defeated, beat up, battered, at your last wit's end, can't take it, want to give up, don't want to do it anymore. Now is the perfect time to go to God. Now's the perfect time to go sit at Jesus' feet. Get on your hands and knees on the ground like I did at midnight, in the dark if you have to, and cry out to God and tell him, I need you to fix this. I can't do this myself. I'm asking you to come into my life. It is as simple as that. And then step back and get out of his way and let him do what he knows that he can do best. And that is to heal you, to change your heart, and to mold you into the person that he has called you to be. Thank you so much for listening to my testimony. There's a lot of parts that I leave out, but that's only because I'm in the middle of writing a book right now. And in my book, it is going to have a lot more of my stories. So my book is called From the Gates of Hell to a New Creation, My Path to Redemption. And this book is really going to go into depth about childhood stories, childhood experiences. I go into more detail about the trauma that I experienced, as well as just things that happened in my life. Usually when you're doing a testimony, you're trying to really focus on the things of your past, but also how Jesus brought you to him and how you changed. And so with my book, I'm able to get more in detail and then go into more detail about the path of how Jesus changed me. And there's a lot of stuff that I leave out in between of things that God had to do with me and for me in order to get me to where I am now. I don't have a release date on the book yet, but look out for the book, From the Gates of Hell to a New Creation, My Path to Redemption. And please make sure that you tune in and subscribe to this podcast. So I will be hosting this podcast, and from here on out, you are going to be able to hear other people's testimonies of how Jesus came and set them free. I started this podcast to share my testimony and to really get it out there. And in that process, God has moved me to also get other people to come on this testimony platform and to share theirs as well, because I am thoroughly convinced, I 100% believe that your testimony is a superpower and it is a weapon against the devil. Through your testimony alone, you can bring someone to Jesus Christ. You can give them hope again when they are in a dark place and a dark situation. So make sure that you tune in every Thursday. I'm going to be dropping a new episode. Until then, stay safe out there.